Hi everyone. So the topic that I studied throughout this semester was Tito Puente. Tito Puente is one of the most highly recognized figures in Latin music history. In fact, he is known to many as the King of Latin music. Born as Ernest Anthony Puente Jr. on April 20th, 1923, Tito became the son of Puerto Rican immigrants. He was born at the Harlem Hospital, located in New York City. His father, Ernest Sr. Puente, was originally from Guayanilla, while his mother, Urcilia Ortiz Puente, was born in Coamo. Tito's parents arrived in New York City shortly before their son's birth. The family lived in East Harlem, which was also referred to as El Barrio, Spanish for the neighborhood. Tito's parents decided to live in El Barrio because of the opportunities that existed there. At the time, landlords were giving away 2 months free of rent. Rarely anybody would choose to deny an offer like that. Additionally, El Barrio was a community comprised largely of Puerto Rican immigrants. Because everybody was in the same situation, this made it much easier to assimilate into American culture. While many may think El Barrio was the ultimate place for people to start a new life, this is farthest from the truth. Living side by side with Cubans, the two groups experienced cultural differences, creating hostility. However, there was one unifying force that brought them together, and that was the power of music. Ever since he was little, Tito Puente developed a strong interest in music. He grew up during the Jazz Age and spent hours listening to the sounds of big band and swing music on the radio. Ever since he was a little boy, he drummed so loudly on the kitchen table using pots and pans. Sometimes the neighbors were so mad of the loud noises coming from Puente's house that they yelled at his mother to get her some music lessons. His parents were quick to recognize their son's passion for music, and at that moment, Tito's mother knew it would be best to enroll him in the New York School of Music. Every Saturday, Tito received private piano lessons from pianist Victoria Hernandez, who was actually the sister of well-known Puerto Rican composer Rafael Hernandez. She taught Tito every single week. He learned to play semi-classical and pop tunes that were popular at the time. After his lessons were over, Tito would return home and show off what he learned to his parents. He remembers playing Mis Amores, a Puerto Rican piece that his mother absolutely loved. The piano lessons lasted for about 7 years. Then, with the encouragement from neighbors, Tito's mother signed him up for drum lessons. To afford the 25 cents a lesson, she had to sneak the money from her husband's pockets when he was asleep at night because money was tight. The drumming lessons were taught by a show drummer teacher called Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams didn't have much knowledge of Latin music, but he taught Tito other important skills, like how to read music and improve his technique on the snare drums. Ultimately, Mr. Williams provided him with a strong musical foundation. He got so good that by age 15, some were calling him El Niño Prodigo, which means the child prodigy. It wasn't until the 1940s where Tito Puente advanced his career tremendously. The Machito Orchestra was one of the first bands to play both jazz and Latin music together. Uba Nieto, the band's regular drummer, was drafted into World War II. The band was looking for a replacement, and Tito Puente was chosen to fill the spot. He received many solos while part of the band, playing his drums in front of live audiences for all to see. Unexpectedly, Tito himself was drafted into the United States Navy in 1942. Tito's entry into the war did not stop him from expressing his musical interest to others. Whenever Tito had free time at sea, he played alto sax in the ship's band. Each morning, the entire crew would wake up to the sound of Tito's bugle blaring. Following Tito's participation in the war, he returned home and studied at the Juilliard School of Music, located in New York City. Tito strongly disliked how the school was only focused on classical music. Instead, he decided to form his own band, called the Piccadilly Boys. The band was later renamed to the Tito Puente Orchestra. Puente and his band played many shows at the Palladium Ballroom, which was a venue in New York City. Together, they attracted massive crowds of devoted Latin music fans. The Palladium Ballroom was a dance hall located at West 53rd Street and Broadway. The venue first opened its doors in 1949 and it continued attracting visitors until it closed in 1966. Throughout the 1940s and 1950s, Latin music started to grow significantly within New York City and was starting to become just as big as jazz music was. However, there was one problem. The only places people could go to hear Latin music live were all uptown, specifically in Spanish Harlem, where Puente grew up, and in the Bronx. The venue was on the verge of closing due to economic difficulties until an event promoter at the time, Federico Pagani, came up with an idea. He approached the owners of the Palladium, Max and Helen Hyman, with an idea for a Sunday matinee show that featured Latin music. This would be great exposure for Latin music in New York City, and it would be the only place for people to hear it live further downtown. The Hymans liked the sound of Pagani's idea and quickly made plans to prepare for the upcoming Sunday show. The Sunday matinee show turned out to be a huge success, and many dancers showed up to enjoy the beat of Latin music. There was only one obstacle that stood in the way of the venue reaching its fullest potential. When the Palladium first opened, the dance hall was established for Anglos only. However, Max Hyman immediately recognized this would become a problem. Many of the popular Latin bands performed at venues where there was a more diverse audience. Meanwhile, Hyman was only able to schedule lesser-known Latin bands to perform at the Palladium matinee session. In order to maintain proper funding, he decided it would be best to open the venue up to Blacks, Puerto Ricans, and Cubans. This would bring much more energy and liveliness to the Palladium Ballroom. As soon as the Palladium began welcoming people of all different cultures, it quickly became one of the most popular Latin dance halls in the city. Crowds lined up outside and extended for 2 to 3 blocks long. In order to handle the high demand of visitors, Hyman decided to open up the venue on Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights. Every Wednesday night, there were amateur dance contests which were held, in addition to a professional mambo show. In order to keep the audience engaged in what was happening on stage, Hyman selected contestants from the audience to compete in these competitions. Despite the success of these competitions, the crowds were more intrigued with the big three: Tito Puente, Tito Rodriguez, and Machito. The mambo was becoming one of the biggest dance crazes at the time, and Tito Puente, Tito Rodriguez, and Machito had mambo hits of their own that they wanted to share with the audience. The 3 musicians were extremely entertaining to watch perform on stage. They battled it out, always trying to outdo one another. For example, once Machito finished his set, Tito Puente picked up right after him without missing a beat. When Puente was done, then Rodriguez would join in. The Palladium concertgoers always enjoyed witnessing the big three battle it out on stage. Once the Palladium had built up its outstanding reputation, celebrities started attending concerts there as well. People like Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Peter Lawford, and George Hamilton frequently visited the venue. One celebrity in particular that really admired Tito Puente was Mort Schumann. Schumann was a famous American singer, songwriter, and pianist. He is most widely recognized for his work in co-writing rock and roll hits such as Viva Las Vegas. Although he wrote rock and roll, he lived, ate, drank, and breathed Latino. Schumann absolutely loved listening to the sounds of Latin orchestras led by Tito Puente at the Palladium. Puente provided Schumann with inspiration to incorporate a touch of Spanish music within his own songs. Puente's extreme devotion to his music and craft served as a source of inspiration not just for Schumann, but for all of the concert goers at the Palladium as well. Now that Tito Puente was one of the most popular Latin musicians, he made many media appearances. In 1991, he made a special cameo appearance in the Mambo Kings movie. Tito was on many of the late-night talk shows and was even featured on television shows like Sesame Street, The Simpsons, and programs on Nickelodeon. On his episode of Sesame Street, Tito Puente proved the impossible. His music got Oscar the Grouch, a character who is known to always be grumpy and in a bad mood, to dance. Despite all these opportunities coming his way, Tito always went back to performing at clubs in New York City. He loved watching people dance directly in front of him to the beat of his own music. Unfortunately, Tito Puente passed away on May 31, 2000, at the age of 77. He has become a symbol of New York City and will never be forgotten. During a time of great tension between many immigrant groups, Puente's music was able to unite people across all different cultures. People from all throughout New York City were able to embrace their love for Tito Puente's music together. In venues like the Palladium Ballroom, everybody felt equal. While they were there, people were able to forget about their worries for a while and set their differences aside, because they were all there for the same reason, to hear Latin music. The crowds were diverse at the Palladium Ballroom, and nobody was ever denied entry because of their race, background, ethnicity, or gender. Puente's legacy will continue to live on. New York City would most certainly not be the same if it wasn't for his ability to unify people across cultures through the influence of his music.